Hi, it's me, the storyteller. Thank you for joining me. Most of my stories on this channel are based on actual events, and some aren't. I'll let you decide if this story is fiction, or if it's not. My name's Mason, and this, I'll call it Hiking Nightmare, happened in 2012. I lived in Boise, Idaho, and was an avid hiker at the time, with a huge emphasis on was. I explored new trails almost every weekend as I became pretty addicted to it. On this particular week, I took Friday off work and drove about 200 miles to a place I'd never been. The trail was listed on a hiking forum under one of those too vague names: Hidden Creek, North Fork Loop. A half circle of forest and ridge running around a glacier-fed lake, only accessible by foot. I parked on the shoulder of a narrow pull-out road, gravel popping under the tires as I eased to a stop. The trailhead was just past a sagging wooden gate and a faded sign with a green U.S. Forest Service logo, but no real name. No map, just a few bullet holes in the corner of the sign and the vague sense that people didn't come here often. I stepped out of the car into that kind of silence you only get in the mountains, thick and almost alive. I was lacing up my boots when I noticed the other car. It was an older silver Subaru, parked about 30 feet down the road, nose half in a ditch. It looked like it had been there a while. Windows dusty, a few pine needles stuck to the windshield. I assumed someone else was already up on the trail until I saw her. She was leaning against the driver's side door, arms folded like she'd been waiting. She smiled when she saw me, just a quick, polite flash. Maybe mid-30s, athletic build, dark hair pulled back, big hiking pack resting on the ground next to her. She didn't wave or call out, just kind of waited for me to say something first. I asked if she was heading out on the trail too, and she said, no, well, maybe. She'd planned to meet a friend, but the friend never showed. Said she'd been waiting for nearly an hour and was just about to give up when I pulled in. There was a pause. One of those moments where you know a question's coming before it's even spoken. Then she asked if I was hiking alone. I told her yeah, I was. Just a weekend loop. Wanted to camp near the lake, maybe do some photos. She nodded. Then she asked if I'd mind the company. I didn't know what to say at first. I mean, she seemed normal enough. Friendly. Confident. There was no awkwardness in her body language, and her pack looked like it had seen real use. I hesitated, then told her it was fine as long as she didn't mind my pace. I like to take it slow, stop for photos sometimes. She said she didn't mind, grabbed her pack, and we started walking together into the trees. We introduced ourselves after the first switchback. She said her name was Raquel. The first few miles were quiet in a good way. We didn't talk constantly, just enough to keep things from getting awkward. She mentioned she lived about 3 hours south and had been trying to get out more lately, away from the noise. I told her I worked remote most days, so a weekend offline was half necessity, half detox. We paused at a small overlook mid-morning, where the trees thinned and gave us a hazy view of the ridge ahead. I took a few photos, nothing amazing, just for memory's sake, and offered to take one of her. She politely declined, saying she never liked pictures of herself. Then, almost like an afterthought, she added that she wasn't big on social media either. Something about the way she said it stood out. Not judgmental, not shy, just final. Like the conversation didn't need to go any further. We hiked for another 20 minutes before I got that feeling. You know the one. Like something's just out of view. Like you're being watched. At first, I chalked it up to being in unfamiliar terrain, even though I wasn't technically alone. But the feeling lingered. I caught myself glancing behind us more than once. Eventually, we crossed a small stream, a rocky little dip in the trail with slick moss and a few scattered logs acting as makeshift bridges. As I stepped across, I instinctively turned back to offer Raquel a hand, and that's when I saw it. Up the hill, maybe 100 yards through the trees, someone was standing. I didn't see their face, just the shape. Male, tall, wide shoulders, wearing mismatched clothing, camo jacket, dark pants, and something that looked like a leather apron or utility belt hanging across the front. His head was covered, either a hood or long hair, I couldn't tell. He wasn't moving, just standing there, angled toward us. I blinked. My heart kicked a little. But when I looked back, he was gone. Raquel asked what was wrong. I told her I thought I saw someone. She followed my gaze, eyes scanning the hillside. When she didn't see anything, she shrugged and said it was probably a hunter. Maybe someone out checking trail cams or scouting. She said folks like that come and go all the time. I wanted to believe her. It was early fall after all, hunting season in some areas. But something about the figure, it hadn't felt like a coincidence. I nodded anyway and let it go. For now. We pressed on, deeper into the trail. The sun had shifted overhead, and the air took on that high country stillness, like the woods were holding their breath. The only sounds were the occasional bird call and the rhythmic crunch of our boots. Raquel had warmed up a little. She wasn't overly talkative, but she asked about my job, where I'd grown up. Her questions were casual, surface level, yet focused, like she was gathering a profile. We stopped at a clearing around noon, and I offered to make lunch. A small camp stove, some instant rice and tuna, nothing special. Raquel sat across from me on a fallen log, her back straight, hair pulled loose from her pack strap. She wasn't overly talkative, but there were moments, a faint smirk when I joked about my terrible camp meals, the way her eyes lingered a second too long when I looked up. That made me wonder if she was flirting or just being polite. It had been almost 2 years since my last relationship ended, and I'd convinced myself I was better off keeping to myself. But something about Raquel, the calm, the quiet steadiness, made me curious in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. I told myself it was nothing, just two hikers sharing a trail and some silence. Still, when we packed up and started walking again, I caught myself watching her a moment longer than I meant to. After lunch, we descended into a shallow valley. The trail dipped toward a creek, a slow-moving, rocky stream that wound along the base of the ridge like a lazy vein. We moved quietly, the air cooler down here, dense with pine and fir. Everything felt closed in, and that's when I saw him again. Across the creek, maybe 50 yards out. Behind a tree. This time I saw more detail. The man was wearing a long leather apron, like the kind a butcher might wear, or maybe a blacksmith. Camo jacket underneath, hood up, a dark beard barely visible. He wasn't moving, just watching. He had something in his hand, long, angled. I stopped cold. Raquel stepped beside me, following my gaze again. But when I pointed, the man was already gone, just like before. I asked if she'd seen him. She shook her head slowly, then said, maybe it was a hunter, again. Her tone was flat, like she was trying not to spook me. I pressed her a little, asked if it seemed normal to her that someone would just be standing like that, in silence. Twice now, watching us. She hesitated. Then she shrugged and said it was probably nothing. Maybe someone out doing their own solo hike who got spooked by us first. It didn't feel like nothing. We crossed the creek and kept going. My pulse was still elevated. I glanced behind us every few minutes, but saw nothing. Eventually, we reached a switchback that curved up toward a higher ridge. That's when Raquel finally said something strange. She mentioned how nice it was that the trail was still quiet, even this far in. Not many people would hike this deep unless they knew exactly where they were going. It was the way she said it that stuck with me, like she wasn't surprised at all. I kept walking, but the tension never left my shoulders. Every pine needle crunch, every breeze rustling the underbrush, made my ears twitch. I wasn't having fun anymore, not even close. Raquel, meanwhile, seemed unaffected. She pointed out a patch of wildflowers, commented on the ridgeline, even suggested we push just a little farther, to a spot she said would overlook a hidden lake. That was the first time I pushed back. I told her I didn't feel right, that I'd had this weird gut feeling ever since the trailhead, that I'd seen the guy twice now, and it wasn't sitting well. Her face changed, not annoyed exactly, more like disappointed, like she thought I was being dramatic. She asked if I was scared. I didn't answer that directly. I just told her I was going to turn back. Said she could come with me or not, but I wasn't staying up here any longer than I had to. She didn't argue. Not exactly. She just stood there for a second, still as stone. Then quietly said, "You go ahead, I'll catch up." I didn't wait. I turned and started down the trail the way we came, heart thudding, watching the trees now with full awareness. Something felt cracked, wide open. Not just the man with the crossbow, her too. 10 minutes into the descent, just before the ridge curved down toward the creek, I heard her voice echo behind me. "He's getting away." It wasn't panic. It wasn't confusion. It was directive. I didn't look back. Branches tore at my sleeves as I barreled downhill, feet sliding on gravel and wet pine needles. My only goal now was distance. Just get away. That's when the first bolt hissed past me. It struck a tree just off the trail with a dead thump, clean and fast, no warning. I dropped instantly, crawling into the brush. My breathing was so loud I thought it might give me away. Somewhere uphill, I heard the rush of movement, Raquel's voice, low and urgent. Another set of footsteps joined hers, heavier, purposeful. He was real. They were both real, and they were working together. My backpack kept getting caught on branches, and it was slowing me down. I tried to power through, but it was dragging me back like a leash, so I yanked the straps off my shoulders, letting it drop into the brush. I had at least $600 invested in that pack and what was inside it, but I didn't care. I'd rather lose gear than lose my life. I kept going, half running, half falling down the switchbacks that had felt so calm and scenic on the way up. Now they were death traps, exposed and open. I could still hear movement behind me, crashing through underbrush, low grunts, and then Raquel's voice, calling my name, sweet at first, then sharper. Then came the whistling thunk of another bolt. It struck a tree just inches from me. I veered hard, nearly tumbling off the edge of a dry ravine, and slid down it, scraping my hands and arms on broken branches and thorny roots. I didn't stop. I couldn't. Every part of me screamed for oxygen, but adrenaline refused to let me slow down. Eventually, I broke through a final row of trees, and the trailhead opened up in front of me like salvation. My car sat there, untouched. I sprinted across the gravel lot, flung open the door, and got in. No hesitation, no looking back. As I fumbled the keys into the ignition, I heard something behind me. Not a shout, not a step, just breathing, heavy, close. I hit the lock button, slammed it. Then I turned the key. The engine stuttered for half a second that felt like forever, then roared to life. I backed out so fast The tires sprayed gravel. I didn't even glance in the rear view until I was half a mile down the road. When I finally did, the trailhead was empty. But I swear, I caught a glimpse of that same pale green flannel shirt, standing just behind the tree line. When I got home, I talked to a couple of friends about my experience. I asked them if I should call the police and file a report. One of my friends didn't think it would even make a difference. Where I was hiking was very remote. No chance of there being any CCTV cameras nearby. I hadn't gotten that license plate number from Raquel's car either, if it was even her car to begin with. My friend said it could have been another victim's car. That sat with me a moment. It was then I realized how lucky I really was. But the what-ifs still haunt me. What if I hadn't noticed that man by the stream? What if I hadn't turned around when I did? What if I'd followed Raquel deeper into the woods, where cell service cuts out, and no one hears you scream? I think about that last moment, when she turned, eyes locking onto mine, and called out, "He's getting away." It wasn't shock in her voice, it was disappointment, like I'd ruined their plan. I never hike solo anymore, and I'm extremely cautious of other hikers now. I can guarantee one thing: I'll never trust anyone on the trail like that again. If you enjoyed this story, please consider subscribing to the channel. Give it a like, a comment, and maybe a share. But if you didn't like the story, maybe share it with someone you don't like. In any case, I'm glad you stuck around to the end.